I am about to share with you a super underrated tool in business, and it is storytelling. Storytelling is such a wildly important tool, especially in this era of AI and disconnection. Stories help us bring connection to our audience, which is a wonderful way to market. So I am joined with my special guest, Trang Nova, in this episode today, and she's going to help us go through how to write a good story, how to actually bring emotion into it, how much we're meant to share, and what kind of different things we can use stories in, whether it's emails or social media, website, or all of the above. And if you don't know Trang Nova is a speaking coach for entrepreneurs who want to speak with confident authority so they can be recognized as visible leaders in their business and on stages. Through Trang's lifelong journey from being a withdrawn introvert to now being featured on global platforms like TEDx and Medium, she realized that speaking is a skill that can be mastered by anyone, not just to those who it comes naturally. So now she is on a mission to help others harness the power of their voice. When she's not on stage or coaching others, you'll probably find her hiking a mountain somewhere, giving her dogs forced cuddles, or stuffing her face with ice cream. I can totally relate. All right, let's dive in. All right, welcome Trang to the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. I'm going to kick you off with the same question I talk to everyone with, which is, could you let us behind the scenes a little bit on what an average day in the life and business of you looks like? Because I know it's a little bit different to, probably very different to my life.
I love this question, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, that I always ask this question to others because I am always very curious. For me, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I'm sure many people listening can resonate. There's no 2 days that are exactly the same. However, there are various elements of my days that I live by, and it is my routine. So to start with, and we were also talking about this before recording, I'm currently in Bali, and it is a beautiful way to escape the Melbourne cold. So to start with, I actually split my life between Melbourne and Bali, which means that my days can look and feel very different. You know, sometimes I am rugged up when it's Melbourne winter in the big smoke of the big city, putting on my boots, putting on my coat to go to a speaking event. And then in Bali, I'm working in sandals and I'm like in flowy pants because it's hot and I'm on a tropical island. But the things that remain consistent every single day, no matter where I am, are my mornings. And this is something that I have developed ever since I was working. So I remember I'd graduated university as a physiotherapist and I was working long days from 8 a.m. sometimes till 6, 7, 8 p.m. And because of that, I had no choice but to have a very dialed in morning routine where I could optimize myself for the day. So the morning is when I get up, and then within 15 minutes, I've got my activewear on and I'm out the door. I don't even eat before, which is not necessarily a good thing, but I go to the gym, I do a run, I come back, I shower, I have my breakfast. That's when I can sit down for the first time in the morning. And then at that point, I am ready to take on my day. I usually journal when I'm having breakfast as well. So I set my intention for the day. And then from there onwards, the rest of the day, who knows what it looks like. But that morning routine remains consistent, whether I'm starting my day at 8 a.m. or 5 a.m. sometimes.
Yeah. So it's really varied. That's really interesting. I'm struggling with routines at the moment because I'm in like deep, sometimes in business, you just have to like do really hard things a lot of the time for like a small period of time. I'm like hustling, for want of a better word. And it means that I'm then really tired in the mornings. So I'm less productive then. And then I was just thinking, this is totally relevant, but my daughter has started kinder this year. So we're going to 8:30 drop-offs for 3 days a week. And me and my husband have both pretty much always worked for ourselves. And I'm like, what is this thing that I need to be in a certain place at a particular time and looking like a person? I'm like, oh.
Yes. And it's just like, wait, I have to actually get up and stick to this schedule? Like what?
And like drive in like when there's other cars on the road, like usually I just try to avoid all like work time and school drop-offs and all that. Anyway, irrelevant, but I feel like I need to get a bit of routine going soon because otherwise next year when it's 5 mornings a week, I'm going to be struggling. Any hoozles. Let's dive back into the content of the podcast. Thank you for sharing a bit of an insight into your mornings. I loved hearing that. Okay, so we're going to chat a little bit about storytelling in business and in, I guess, our marketing. Could you give me a little bit of it, like, why do you think that storytelling can be a really powerful tool for us as small business owners?
Great question, Jackie. I am the biggest fan of storytelling because I've gone through the journey where previously I didn't know how to storytell. So I would be talking to people, whether it's one-to-one or running a workshop or something. And as I'm talking, I notice that their eyes glaze over or they're starting to look around. So they're getting distracted. I can tell that they are daydreaming and I can tell that I've lost them. And storytelling has been a journey that I've gone on to learn how to do it, to implement it into the way that I communicate, and have found that it has made eons of a difference in how I engage with people. Because instead of their eyes glazing over and them looking over my shoulder at something else behind me, they are now on the edge of their seats. They're leaning in, and you can tell that they are captivated to hear what's going to come next. And the reason this is as humans, we bond over storytelling. Like back in the day, we would sit around a campfire, we would tell stories, pass them down from generation to generation. We would draw those stories on the walls of caves. And it's the one difference between you and your best friend and you and a stranger on the street. Because the one thing that you and your best friend have is you have these shared memories, these shared stories that you can bond over. Like you know each other inside out. You know about that time that they were in high school and they completely embarrassed themselves in front of their crush. Like you know about the time that you went traveling together and you almost died together on a road trip. So you can get to that level and you can be completely open and trusting with them. Versus a stranger on the street, like you don't know anything about their backgrounds, their political stance, what their beliefs and philosophies are. So then you have to tiptoe around conversation, which is why so many of us, when we first meet someone, it defaults to, oh, well, isn't it hot today? Isn't it cold today? Typical Melbourne. Like we default to chit chat at the small talk level. So that's what storytelling does. It bonds us. It creates trust and rapport, which is absolutely required for our marketing, our sales, and to build lasting relationships in our business.
Yeah, that was incredible. I love that so much. Yeah, that's really great. And I find storytelling really tricky because my practical brain wants to go, need to get details out and need to show you that my thing is good and then you buy it, please. And I don't forget the storytelling in between, which every time I ever share a story, I don't know why it takes me so long to remember this. It performs so much better than when I'm just sharing things and details and why something is so great. And yeah, I love that. Okay, before I get into some more storytelling, I guess, tips or thoughts from you, I want to hear a bit of your story. Could you give us like a little snippet of what your story has been from introvert to TEDx speaker and everything kind of in between?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to take it right back, I was born in Melbourne to Vietnamese immigrant parents. So growing up, I was raised in quite a traditional way. I grew up speaking Vietnamese, not English. So at school, I was that shy kid sitting in the corner on my own, surrounded by other kids playing in what seems like an alien language. And that continued. I grew up that narrative with that narrative, thinking that I didn't belong, that people didn't like me. And to continue with the traditional Asian culture, I often say that in high school I had 3 career options, and it was to become a doctor, a lawyer, or a disappointment. But I was quite sporty, so I met my parents in the middle, and I graduated uni as a physiotherapist. But after just a few years of practice, it became very clear that my heart wasn't in that profession. It was a profession that I'd chosen because that's what I thought I should do rather than what I wanted to do. And like my dad's a doctor, my sister's a dentist, so that's what I was surrounded by. And I remember one morning going out for a run and something happened that changed everything. I'd stepped out on the footpath to start my run and I heard a crunch. And I was like, what's that? What's going on? I looked down and I'd stepped on a snail. Now, not the first time that that's happened before, and I'm sure you've done that as well by accident, but for some reason that morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I couldn't help but feel guilty that me going for a run on this day at this time, I'd caused such an effect on something outside of me. Like in this case, I had killed something. So as I was running, it dawned on me that every decision I make has a consequence. And often these consequences go beyond what I would witness or understand. But this morning, I had a consequence right in front of me that really awakened this realization. And then it dawned on me that as a human, I have such a footprint. And I could have such a footprint even more in what I would continue to do every single day for the rest of my life, especially in my work. So that's when I started to question how I could help people, not just as athletes, but as human beings. And I wanted to have more of an impact. I wanted to help people more comprehensively. So that's when I started my very first business as a life coach. And after doing that for some time, I started to get the most wonderful feedback. People would say to me, Trang, you've changed my life. Or Trang, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be where I am now. And that's when I realized the power of my voice. Because throughout my career, I had worked in different ways. But there was one common denominator of how I could help people, whether it's to encourage them to run a marathon, or to start their business, or to leave a toxic relationship. And that common denominator was my voice. So that's why I went all in on becoming a speaker and being a speaking coach. Because I believe that when more visionary leaders use their voice, if they could speak with confident authority in their business and on stages, then more of us can lead powerful movements that will leave this world a better place than how we were born into it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I loved the little storytelling tidbits that you had in there. And I guess maybe you could give us some tips on that, because like even the subtle thing that you just shared there of like, I heard a crunch. And then our brains are like, what was the crunch? And then we're starting to think, and like, we're in the journey with you. And so you obviously did that quite intentionally. Do you have some tips around how we can, because there's a storyteller and then there's someone telling a story. And I feel like they can be different. How can we tell a good story that actually brings people in rather than, so yesterday I went to the shops and I bought a broccoli.
Yes, there are absolutely ingredients to this. And like, especially with my science background, I loved nerding out on what these ingredients are. So the difference of what you just said, Jackie, is the difference between telling a story versus summarizing an event. And summarizing an event, you go through the key elements, right? The who, the what, the where, the when. But the story, as you said, it brings people into the moment as though they are living it with you. And when that happens, there is that element of anticipation. And when there's anticipation, you have people who have their heads stuck in a fiction book without like for hours late at night because they're so drawn to what's going to happen next. You have people sitting on the edge of their seat watching your videos on YouTube or listening to your podcast. So at the core, between a summary and a story, we do need the basic elements. We do need the 5 W's, which is the who, what, where, when, and why. So that is something that we all already do. And we do need that as a foundation so that there is context to our story. But this is where people get stuck, because people are stuck at the level of using the 5 W's, but then they struggle to take it to that next level where there is that anticipation and that element of, oh my gosh, this is such an engaging story. The next set of ingredients that turns a summary into a story are the 5 senses. So as humans, we live through our senses, don't we? What we see, smell, taste, hear, and feel. And when we bring those 5 senses into a story, it brings it to life. It goes from being a report or a summary to, oh my gosh, this is a roller coaster of a journey that I am being taken on. So that's what I did with that snail story. I'll use that story as an example, because I could have just said, one morning I went out for a run, I stepped on a snail, and then I realized that my decisions have consequences. I could have done that, but it would have had nowhere near the same effect as I heard a crunch. And then I was like, what was that? What's going on? I looked down. And at this point, I am taking you into that moment of just as much confusion and being unsure what has just happened. And now you're like, oh my gosh, did you break your ankle? What did you do? And then I reveal that I stepped on a snail. So then that anticipation leads to the next part of the story. I'll give you another example. I could summarize an event last weekend by saying, I had a fight with my partner. It was nasty. We were yelling at each other. So that covers the basis of it, but that's still just a summary. But what if I added the senses into it? And I say, I remember I was sitting by the kitchen bench. It was a Sunday evening. I was looking out the window and it was raining heavily. It was gloomy outside. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, the door slams open. My partner storms into the room and he glares at me with angry eyes. And he yells, why didn't you take the bins out last night? Exactly the same story. But now with the elements of, oh, it was raining outside, it was gloomy. Suddenly the door slams open. Like you can see it, you can hear it in your own mind. You can bring the vision and live it with me. And then, my partner storms into the room. He glares at me with angry eyes and then he yells. So now I'm making it so much more descriptive and you are now brought into the moment as though you were living it.
That's really amazing. I hope you all were taking notes as you listened to that. Bringing, and it's not rocket science, but I think like for me, for example, as you can tell, I talk quickly. I kind of want to get to the point, and I think that people are kind of getting bored of listening to me, so I try to move things along quickly. And so storytelling is tricky because you have to purposely spread out the story, but the effects are so much more worthwhile. So it's totally worth it. Okay, so say we want to start using storytelling more in our marketing. Where are actual places to use it? I could give some examples, but I'm going to let you do that. But then I want you to answer the question of, this is one I struggle with. Actually, I'm going to ask this afterwards. Share with the options, and then I'm going to ask a rebuttal question that I find tricky myself.
Oh, okay. I'm ready for this. Well, in terms of where we can use storytelling, where wouldn't we use storytelling is the question. We can use it anywhere and everywhere. Like I mentioned before, when you see a stranger on the street, you know nothing about them. And that's where people default to introducing themselves in a way that's like, so this is me, this is what I do for work, this is my background, this is where I live. Like they go into that summarizing mode. But hey, even from the get-go, from the first impression, you can jump into storytelling. So storytelling is fantastic for networking events when you're meeting people. Turn your introduction into a story.
How would you do that?
I would use that story that I just shared with you, the snail story. I would use that, but in a more condensed version. So I'll actually share with you an example of this because this is a fantastic experience of storytelling. Last year, I was at a conference and there was one point that I was running for the elevator. So the man who was standing inside the elevator really kindly held the doors open for me. I walked inside the elevator and of course we get chatting. So then he asks me, so what's your name and what do you do? And at this point, I'm like, okay, we're in an elevator. We have a maximum of 20 seconds. So I condensed down the story that I just told you into a 20-second version. So of course I can't go into the details of the snail anymore, but I talk about how I have this quarter life crisis where I decide I don't want to just help people as athletes, but I want to help them as humans. And then I went all in on speaking because that's my superpower, my ability to move people with my voice. And at the time I was specifically working with women because historically women have had that disadvantage of being silenced, and that gap still persists today. So I said that to him in about 20 seconds. And I remember as I was telling this story, his eyes widened and he was like, Trang, oh my gosh, I am the founder and CEO of a national-wide education company where majority of my teaching staff are female. And I have seen the exact difference in confidence that you are talking about. Hey, let's exchange contact details. I'd love for you to run some workshops for us. And then in the following months from that initial meeting, I got flown out to different states across Australia to talk alongside this CEO and to run workshops for their company. All because of a 20-second story in an elevator when we first met. So what we do need to do is we do need to adapt our storytelling. A good story is about 2 minutes long, but sometimes we don't have that long. Sometimes it's going to be 30 seconds. And sometimes if we're in a one-on-one setting, it can even be 4 minutes if we'd like. So we can use storytelling at different degrees of duration for the context that we are in. So we could use storytelling in our TikToks and in our Reels. That's what a lot of people do already. But we don't have 2 minutes. We might have 30 seconds or 40 seconds. We can use storytelling on our founder story video on the About Me page on our website. We can use storytelling in our podcasts, in our YouTube videos. Essentially, any time that we want to teach a lesson, this is my rule, because many of you are listening are in business that is like service-based, or maybe you have products and you are wanting to build clientele that are loyal to you and you have a lasting relationship, right? So at any time that you communicate with them, anytime you want to teach something, so especially for coaches, content creators out there, anytime you want to teach something, my rule is don't go straight into the teaching. Always start it with a story and then turn that into a lesson. So that would be my guideline for you to start challenging yourself with. You know, for those of you who are listening, what if you were to put aside 2 hours for this week? 2 hours where you sit down and you build a story bank. So go back in time and start to collate different moments in your life, different moments in your business, your origin moments, your pivotal moments, small moments that have turned into something bigger, interesting moments, moments that you've reflected on and you've gotten something out of it. Like whatever it is, collate those stories into this story bank, put it in your notepad on your phone or put it in a Word document. And then now you have a bank of stories to draw from that will lead to different lessons or teachings that you might have in your business.
That's a really good tip. I hope you're all doing that, because it's a very good tip to have that. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, I don't have any interesting stories, I can't do that. But we all do. We kind of, whenever I've challenged myself to come up with a story bank, I find like it's hard to think of the first couple and then your mind starts rolling. It's like, oh, and then this happened that time and this happened that time. So push the tricky stage at the start if you're feeling that.
Yeah.
And
another way that you can overcome that as well, because like it can be challenging to come up with those stories. So you can even break it down to different areas of your life if you'd like. So work-related ones, personal-related ones, relationship, travel. You can also draw a timeline and brainstorm year to year. So what's happened this year? What happened last year? What happened when you were in your early 20s or your teenage years? Another way to help is utilize the brains of your friends and family. So ask your parents or ask your friends, hey, do you have any particularly memorable moments with me? And see if they can tell you stories that you might have forgotten about. That can all help to build up this story bank.
Yeah, I love that. Something I challenge myself to do is I send out a newsletter every second week, and in it, it's got like writing from me, and then it's got, here's the podcast I did, here's the YouTube videos I did, here's a template. But at the top, I always do I try to make it a story base. And so I challenge myself every 2 weeks to think of what's something really random that's happened this week that is slightly memorable. And then how can I twist that to being a lesson in design and branding? And it's wild the connections that you can make when you challenge yourself just to think that way. And I get such a great open rate for my newsletters. And I think one of the reasons is because I'm telling a story in there. Like one of the times it was just, I went for a run and my baby started crying when I was halfway through the run. That newsletter and post did incredibly because I was just telling a relatable kind of story.
Yeah. And that's why when it comes to social media, do you ever find, Jackie, that the posts that you come up completely spontaneously and then you write it in 2 minutes, you post it on the spot, they are the ones that do best compared to those type of posts where it's like 5 tips to XYZ and you spent 2 hours curating that carousel and it gets like 2 likes.
Yeah.
But it's the
Yeah.
storytelling ones, the ones that you come up with spontaneously and you're like, oh yes, spark of inspiration. I'm going to post this right now. They're the ones that go off. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn is all about
LinkedIn
that.
scares me.
And you know what? I agree because I stayed far away from LinkedIn up until this year. So at the start of this year, I revived my dead LinkedIn account and I spent some time on there to analyze the behavior of people on LinkedIn compared to Instagram. And that's what everyone does. And this is kind of a joke because people have their stereotype about LinkedIn posts and content. And one of the jokes is people will turn anything into a business lesson. Like you'll get your coffee and you'll spill it on your pants, and then the lesson I got from this in business is like people will create the most far fetched links, but hey, if you can link it well enough, then it works.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I do in my newsletters. I love that. I should make some more LinkedIn posts around that. Okay, so the question I was going to ask you before is,
Yes.
or as you said, we can share it at networking events, we can share it in like a about video, we can share it in, as we've said, social media posts, and you can do that whether it's like using your voice like you would teach, and also in a caption or in email or on a sales page, all sorts of things we can add it in there. I always find it tricky though. I'm getting better at it, but I'd love to know if you have some tips. And it comes back to Instagram posts obviously have a limit with our caption length. And I always used to struggle with how can I tell my full story and bring in enough emotion into this in such a small space. And you've kind of touched on this already when you talked about how we can shorten our story down to a 20-second meeting in an elevator with a random person that becomes a really big opportunity for our business.
Yeah.
And so how do we, I don't know if you've got any tips around how can we like find the bits that are important, but still create enough emotion within 2,000 characters?
Yeah. And this is something that I talk about in my events as well. So last week, I just ran an event in Sydney called Unmute Yourself. And it's for founders who want to write their founder story and then film it to the camera. So this is relevant because I encourage everyone at the workshop to write a founder story that's going to take 3 or 4 minutes because we want to have a comprehensive story with all the details. And then from there, it's much easier to make it shorter than it is to turn a short version into a long version. And the way that we shorten it is we look at the elements that are the most crucial to the direction of the story. So for example, with my snail story, I shared just before the full version of it. But when I shortened it down, I skipped the snail part and I condensed it into, I had a quarter life crisis. And that's when I questioned to myself, how can I help people more comprehensively, not just as athletes, but as human beings? So the snail part can be left out, but then the realization itself needs to be left in because that is what's critical for the next sequence of the story. So the best way is to keep the who, what, where, when, why. We'll have to be more selective about the 5 senses, though. We have to be more selective about those elements that add color to our story, but they're not crucial to the development of the story. I think the best way to do it is to have the longer version. And that's why when I am filming a get ready with me Instagram story or something, I often do it twice because the first time I might be rambling for like 5 minutes. And that's a long Instagram story. No one's going to sit through that. But then the second time round, I do it and it automatically becomes 3 minutes instead of 5 minutes. Automatically. Because the second time round, I don't have to think so much about what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to say because I've already said it before. But this time, it's simply more succinct. I can get to the point faster while still being just as punchy and just as keeping all of the crucial ingredients.
That's a good tip. I find that myself. I hate re-recording things because it feels like it's wasting time. But whenever I've got a video where I've forgotten to hit record or something, and I'm like, oh, I have to do it again. But it's always better because our brains have like got out all of the fluff that we can then see the linking parts so that we can connect them quicker and not have to fluff around so much. So yeah, that's a good, just practical tip. I love that. Oh man, yeah, storytelling, it's so powerful. I think I think it's becoming even more powerful in this day and age with AI and trying to work out how we can differentiate ourselves from just everything. Are you finding that?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And like I even had a client not that long ago who I was looking at their founder story because we were workshopping their founder story together. And they were like, and I read it and I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This is awesome. And they were like, yeah, thanks to ChatGPT. And I was like, I forget because I'm not doing this so much myself. And it's not necessarily I'm doing it intentionally. It's just like I'm still living in 2002. I forget sometimes to use ChatGPT, even though it's there. But yeah, like I could tell that the story was really great because they used ChatGPT. But they said that they had still written majority of it themselves, and they'd used ChatGPT to tighten it up. And then even after using ChatGPT to tighten it up, they would then go back and do one more run through with their own words and making it sound more like them.
Yeah.
So yeah, with AI, and it's just the start. Like some of the conversations I've been having with people in the world of technology and AI and hearing about how exponential the rate of development is for this technology, it's pretty crazy. And it's great at, like it's good at storytelling. It can make stories really good, but we'll never lose the part of human connection where it's face-to-face storytelling. And of course, I have a bit of a bias as a speaking coach. But yeah, we can post about all the carousels we want. We can post about, we can have all the blogs we want. But the direction of where on the online business world is going is more videos. Like LinkedIn has been favoring videos. Instagram is becoming like a TikTok now, right? And TikTok is all videos. So video content is king and queen. It is the direction that we are going in. So it's no longer a question of, am I the type of person who wants to speak to the camera? No, it's a question of, do you still want to be in business in 3 years' time? Like 3 years is a long time, but also not. Like there's a lot that's going to change in the next 3 years, and we're going to be in a place in 3 years that's going to be unrecognizable from where we are now. So storytelling, you can use technology to create the structure of it, but the delivery of it through our body language, through our facial expressions, through our voice is something that I don't believe can be replaced.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just thinking about AI avatars and how much better they're getting and wondering what it's going to look like in 3 years' time. But I think there's always still that human element. And I think another beautiful thing about storytelling is that it does, like, you can definitely use ChatGPT to create an incredible story. And I often do that. But the benefit is of telling a story is you had to have been a part of that, where so much of the content nowadays is just people just smashing out random content like, write me 5 tips to doing this, and it just writes this piece of content. But what's going to connect us with our audience in an age of information overload and just this is us connecting with people on a human level and letting our personality, letting our voice, letting the way that we write and letting our stories be a connecting point in a sea of just information where we're feeling less connected to other human beings. And yeah, so I love that storytelling can be such a powerful differentiator for us in business without having to reinvent the whole wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm still continually working on, because by default it can be very easy to go into that who, what, where, when, why mode. But if we simply remind ourselves that people do crave connection. And even if we feel like we're taking a long time in the spotlight, like what you were saying before, Jackie, when we apply storytelling, it is wild how much we can bond and connect with others, and time just disappears. Like I remember having a dinner once. Have you heard of Vin Zhang? Are you familiar with him?
No.
He's another speaking and communications teacher. He's blown up recently on social media, millions and millions of followers. And in the early days, I remember going to his weekend course, and then he had this intimate VIP dinner with 10 people. And I remember the whole night, it was like 4 or 5 hours over dinner, and everyone was there mainly for him. So we were all meant to be like hanging out together, but everyone was just there like looking at him and watching him talk. And the whole time he's telling story after story, he's making people laugh, he's got people in tears. And over 4 or 5 hours, people are on the edge of their seats, just leaning in and staring at him. And it is so, it's so admirable how much we can move people and bring them together with stories. So if there's anything that if there's anything that you take away from this podcast, it's don't be afraid to take up the spotlight. Like sometimes we are afraid to talk for a long time because we have had those instances where we get interrupted or people tune out, and that is rejection. It doesn't feel good. But when you start to apply these elements of the 5 senses, another one I didn't mention was dialogue. So you know how I said the door slammed open and he yelled, "Why didn't you take out the bins?" Or when I stepped on the snail, I thought to myself, what is that? What's going on? Dialogue in a fiction book would be whatever is in the quotation marks. It's things that we think, it's things that we say, it's things that we hear from other people. So that is another element that can bring these characters to life. But when we apply these elements, it is wild how long we can captivate someone's attention for. So get practicing and stand in the confidence of how well you can captivate and engage your audience and build relationships, even with strangers at a networking event or online.
Such a great tip. I had never even thought about doing it at a networking event. Like, I could definitely work on my, "Hi, I'm Jackie and I help business owners do design stuff." Not really that captivating. So I love that we can kind of, even use it there. And your example of the guy in the elevator just shows how powerful it can be when we do bring people in, bring feeling in, bring in, much more meaning rather than just being very transactional. Like, I do this, I am this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I love that. All right. So much inspiration in there. Thank you for sharing that. If we would like to learn more from you or connect with you, how can we be in your world?
I live online on most platforms. So if you want to check out my website, it is trangnova.com. And then for social media, I'm most active on Instagram and LinkedIn. Well, now I am on LinkedIn. It wasn't just like 9 months ago. So my LinkedIn is Trang Nova and my Instagram is Trang_Nova. So it's my name everywhere, easy to find.
Very good. Those links will all be in the show notes and stuff. So if you want to find those and hit up Trang, please do that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've so appreciated your insights and your stories and your tips. So thank you for sharing them with us.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jackie. Thank you for having me on the show. And I really do hope that this episode has been practical and valuable for those listening.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope you feel encouraged and inspired. And as a bit of a challenge, why don't you go now and just think of one of those stories, use one of those ideas that Trang gave us of how to find a story from our lives, take that and actually start to write a quick story with it. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. That comes with practice, but get something out there and see the connection that it creates with your audience. All right, I'll see you next week for another episode. And if you're not already, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you are following me on Instagram, WhiteDearGD, and we'll see you next week. Bye.